Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, Google, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
and Peter.
Episode 14, recorded March 12th, 2019. Elizabeth Warren votes to break up the Cloud Pod. Good afternoon, guys. Hope you had a great week. And of course, as tradition, Peter, what are we drinking?
Oh, man. I had to just grab something from the fridge, and I ended up with a Pellegrino Aranciata. So, nothing too fun today.
That's too bad.
I made some effort this week. I have a Bruichladdich single malt.
Ooh.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
It's very fancy.
It's my gift for putting up with my my in-laws for 3 weeks.
Very nice. I just grabbed a whiskey from the bar at the hotel I'm staying at tonight. So that's just a nice Macallan here. So I'm just going to go with that. We have a guest here tonight, Matt Adorjan, who is the author of this week's Cool Tools, which we'll get to later this evening. But are you drinking anything enjoyable this evening?
I just have a LaCroix right now. Nothing too exciting. Grapefruit, but that's all.
Nice. Maybe you want to introduce yourself to our avid listeners.
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Matt. Day job at work at a financial services firm called Audible Asset Management, leading our cloud engineering group, basically delivering AWS services to the organization. Previously worked at places like McDonald's corporate, US Foods, PwC, all focusing on AWS. On the side, though, launched the Cloud Ping tool, looking at AWS latency, which we'll talk about later. Also like to write articles based on different AWS topics or solutions, things like that. Most recently, collaborated with the AWS Route 53 team on a blog post about the Route 53 resolver before it launched back in November. So that was kind of cool. So that's a bit about me.
That's awesome. Jonathan actually is attempting to get the Route 53 resolver to work, so maybe he can pick your brain later.
I heard the waiting for Terraform finally launched.
Yeah, that's right. The rules didn't make it for the most recent release, unfortunately.
That's too bad. All right. Well, we don't have any follow-up this week, so let's jump into the new topics. So Google has announced with a very catchy titled article, "How does your cloud storage grow with a scalable plan and a price drop?" So today they basically have highlighted that the one constant today for all businesses is the growing data storage of their business. And they say the biggest issue with that, of course, is that it's unpredictable and makes your finance people very unhappy. So the new pricing that they released basically allows you to commit to a set amount of storage, let's say $10,000 per month of data storage. And if you use up to that amount every month, you'll get no charge. And if you go over that amount, they will actually hold back charging you until the end of the 12-month period. And if that overage does not exceed 30% of your commitment, then you will be able to basically set up a new 12-month commitment at the new peak level and continue on your way. Or if it's over 30%, you pay the difference. Or if you decide, hey, we're off of Google Cloud, you just pay for your overage. This is designed to give you much more predictable costs and allow you to basically simplify your storage plan. This also included a 42% price cut of the cold-line class of storage, which is a nice savings for those using Glacier or cold-line storage.
I think it's cool. One of the first things when we were helping companies years ago move to the cloud was getting the finance team on board with the fact that they didn't know what the bill was going to be at the end of the month. And I think that's still been an issue with procurement, just wanting to know how much they're going to spend, to be able to budget for it. So this is like making the cloud backward compatible.
Anything that makes it easier for enterprises to be able to say, we want to use these new flexible, cool cloud tools, whether it's storage or whatever, but here's our commitment. We know what we're going to pay. People can do their budgets during budget season. They know what it's going to look like. I mean, anything like this where you can commit is great.
And then everybody's happy.
I was wondering how happy finance people actually would be, because if you have an overage, potentially do they have to start accruing for that in their books? And so, while it's not a cash commitment, it is still an accrual activity. So it does simplify part of the problem, but it doesn't solve it completely. But again, if you can wipe that accrual out at the end of the 12-month period, that's not too bad.
I feel sorry for the guys who come in at 31%, and instead of paying the 1% more than the people who came in at 13 get it discounted, they have to pay the full 31%.
Well, I'm sure that there's abilities to talk to your sales rep at Google. Oh, they don't have salespeople. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, yeah, there's definitely a penalty if you're over in that little bit of a window there, but it's still nice to have that predictability. So we'll see. Also in storage, Azure has released what they're calling the Premium Blob storage, which is now in public preview. This is a new performance tier in the Azure Blob storage and complements their existing hot, cool, and archive tiers. They say this is ideal for workloads with high transaction rates or requires very fast access times. And their examples were IoT, telemetry, AI, or scenarios with human editing like video or audio, etc. On average, it's a 10x lower than standard base latency and 40 times lower than 99th percentile of their typical storage. And overall, it's much more expensive than your traditional blob storage. But is this going to be a savings for you guys?
I kind of wonder why they just didn't fix their original product. It's not a great sales pitch.
That was my big fight with this. Like when I read it, I was like, so you're telling me that your blob storage is completely broken and your solution to it is you made a better, more performant. And instead of giving me the benefit of that, you basically said, no, we'll make it a new tier to make your storage complexity even worse. And now I have to manage all of this data blob object storage across now 4 different classes of storage. It doesn't make my life easier and it makes me grumpy.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the other press release for the regular blob storage. Now it's going to say, on average, this is 10 times slower latency and 40 times. I don't know. It's a bad move. They should just have fixed what they already have.
It's very expensive too. So this is the data storage. It's about 0.75 cents per gig. But then they start charging you a bunch of fees for each transaction type. So, number of write operations, number of read operations, and on average, it's a factor of at least 0.02 of a cent more expensive for this hot storage versus others. It can add up pretty quickly.
Would it replace workloads that are using block storage though, which is obviously at a higher price point than object storage? Because that would
I don't know, because I don't know that you can mount blob storage as like a file disk-based storage object in Azure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certain. I would hope that you can't, but I just meant from a performance standpoint.
Yeah, I guess what application in video editing or in these other use cases has that ability to access blob storage in that method? So I don't know. It's a little bit weird.
Zero legacy applications.
Exactly.
Maybe that's what we should do.
Do what? Build applications that aren't legacy?
Build applications that aren't legacy.
Google at the end of last week, and again last week was RSA week, has released several new security tools and services for the Google Cloud. 2 of them are pretty pedestrian. The first one is a DDoS and targeted attack-based protection with Cloud Armor, which is very similar to DDoS and WAF services you're familiar to with Azure and AWS. And then of course they announced an HSM solution which allows you to do FIPS 140-2 level 3 HSM compliance in the cloud. But the third one actually caught my eye because it's pretty interesting. So they're calling it the Web Risk API, and this is a simple API call that client applications can use to check URLs against Google's list of unsafe web resources, including social engineering sites, malware, and any other hostile sites that you can think of. This is the same system that powers Safe Search in the Chrome browser, and so this is pretty interesting to make this available to everybody as an API now for your Google apps.
Apart from a browser, which is where somebody's using to visit these sites, who else really cares about this information? Like, how else are you going to come across these unsafe sites and use them if you're not using Chrome or some other?
Well, I mean, if you think about how many web services today, do posts and do GET requests against different API URLs, if somehow you can maybe subscribe a webhook, for example, to a custom URL, you can put it into a web application. You necessarily don't want to subscribe it to a hostile API or hostile site. So you can now put that into your site and say, hey, you're trying to connect your webhook of your sensitive data to this known bad actor on the internet. It's a nice error messaging I put into your site. But typically you're talking about a web resource in some kind. So it has to be a RESTful API or it has to be a web browser type use case.
Yeah, and I was thinking like this could be, another source for some of these other tools that maybe you would have on the edge of your network or something like that. Just another point to kind of look at to validate URLs. Obviously, Google has a great kind of solution for this, and it's Safe Search. offering. So taking this and putting it as just another checkbox in terms of what's on the edge of your network for things coming in and going out.
Yeah, I could see making a squid plugin or something like that to
Right,
use
exactly.
filters. Yeah, but then my browser already does that, so.
Well, right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, not everyone's corporate policy allows them to use Chrome. So, if you're still stuck in Internet Explorer, you could now use this with Squid and get the benefits.
And even Microsoft wants you to use Chrome now. So,
Yeah, that's true.
is it free or is it a paid service? I didn't see anything about pricing in there, but
I didn't see anything about pricing in the announcement either, and I didn't do the homework to go to the next level and go look at the pricing API to see if it was there. As it's somewhat new, I imagine it may be still in early access, which is why there's no pricing in the press release. Now, moving to an area that I don't like to talk about on the podcast, but is slightly political. Elizabeth Warren has put a bold plan together to break up big tech. And we're not going to talk about the politics of this, but I do want to talk about the concept of breaking up big tech. So her plan is basically that she would like to crack down on the tech industry, proposing a breakup of Amazon, Facebook, and Google. She claims that big tech companies have too much power over the economy, our society, and our democracy. They've bulldozed competition, used our PI for profit, and tilted playing field against everyone else, hurting small businesses and stifling innovation. This is targeted at multiple tech companies, but Amazon would potentially be the biggest hit. And she wants to prevent tech companies from being able to participate on their own platforms as a marketplaces. So, for example, this would mean that Amazon Basics, which is one of their store brands, would not be allowed to be sold on Amazon.com as a competitor to other products on the marketplace. So again, there's two parts to this. The first is, basically not allowing you to choose your own platform, and the second is also resolving what she's considering to be anti-competitive mergers. So this would be things like Amazon needing to divest of Whole Foods and Zappos.com, Facebook divesting WhatsApp and Instagram, for example, or Google dropping Waze and Nest or any others. So pretty bold policy statement, and I'm more interested in how does this even work?
it's really arbitrary. I mean, these are definitely three big tech companies, and yeah, they have huge market shares, but you could say the same thing about the oil companies and about the way they've stifled innovation over the years too. But it seems like a total disincentive to any of these companies to do any good work. I mean, people build platforms for their own uses in general. That's how Amazon built theirs. That's how Google built theirs. I don't know. It's clearly not going to work. There's no legal basis to do this. It would have to be a very slow transition. It'd have to be a changing of the laws around monopolies.
The point of avoiding monopolies is prices going up, right? Goods getting priced at a number where demand exceeds supply, and profits are maximized in that situation versus when there's multiple competitors, prices max profits are where demand equals supply. So, I mean, if you look at these, I think one of the things you look at is, are prices going up? Or is that happening? Are these the areas where that is happening? And if it's not happening, then maybe it's not an area we should be focusing a whole lot of time on.
Or maybe the prices don't go up right now, but all of a sudden Amazon get 98% of the market share, and yeah, they can put prices up because no competitor can compete at that scale.
I mean, but I guess the question I had when I read this was, if I go to a grocery store and next to Toll House cookies is their generic store brand cookies, that's existed for decades now, and no one has that hasn't put Nestle out of business. So I think there is still people who always buy based on brand, and so having a generic brand in the same marketplace, there's people an alternative that you're willing to pay. You don't want to pay for the brand, but you want the product. That doesn't seem like a bad trade-off. So that's a little weird to me. But the bigger question is, does this really actually stifle innovation? Does Amazon.com sold books, and then they realize that they could open up their platform to other third-party sellers and allow them to now sell on the platform? Does that now mean Amazon can't sell books, which is what the company was designed to do? And then they go down the path and they're like, we're going to build out Amazon Web Services, which is a different platform that we're not going to build our Amazon.com on top of. But now, can they not do that either? It just, you see how it can start stifling innovation in a very, very rapid pace that would be worse for the internet in many ways than allowing some of these things. Now, I agree there should probably be some more scrutiny over, can Facebook buy a company like Instagram, especially now that everyone's saying I'm getting off of Facebook, but then they just go to Instagram, which is still Facebook. But it's just weird. The whole platform on a platform story of Amazon seems like a really bad precedent. And same thing with Salesforce.com. Do they not build the Force.com platform because then they're seen as being competitive with their own products? Like, it's so arbitrary, and it's so weird how you would differentiate them between what's a platform that's a technology platform versus a marketplace platform.
The corporate lawyer is going to love it, because so they break up these companies, and we'll have Amazon Marketplace, and we'll have Amazon Web Services, and we'll have Amazon Platform Services, and effectively they'll still have the same board members. All the money will still roll up to some umbrella company like Alphabet that did with Google, and nothing changes. On the face of it, it looks like you're taking a stand against these big tech companies and how they're ruining the economy and they're shutting down local stores, everything else. But effectively, nothing's going to change if you break them up, because there will still be the same entities doing the same deals with each other.
Well, and actually it might make it worse, because now they might get into raising prices, because now all the companies have to make revenue equally. You can't have one product taking a loss at the cost of the other. So now they have to charge for everything, and it actually makes everything more expensive.
Yeah.
So if the thought is innovation is being stifled, I think it's interesting that they picked the industry that has been innovating the fastest in the last 20 years and said that that's the area that we need to break up because innovation is being stifled. Doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and another reason that it's not being stifled is people are building startups every day. They're targeting specific industries, whether it's healthcare or whether it's like the Waze or Nest or people like this, with the intention of being bought by a bigger company, and people will cash in on their equity when their company is bought, and that's how people become self-made millionaires anymore. People innovate hard to be acquired by these large companies deliberately. It's certainly not going to stifle innovation.
I'm in total agreement. I don't see how breaking these apart would help any kind of creation of innovation anywhere, right? Like, you have these economies of scale by having these large companies where you can bounce ideas off of people. You have such a diverse skill set alone within one organization that you can use. Yes, I think there are probably some PII and data things that could use or concerns that could use some scrutiny a little bit, but this whole like breaking apart, I just don't think anyone really wins in that situation.
Yeah, I think Facebook stands separate than Amazon and Google in this conversation for me, because
Absolutely.
I think that what they're doing is buying users, and yeah, I mean they're aggregating the platform. They're going to have a single messaging platform. They're not. Well, Google has kept Waze distinct for years. It's been 4 or 5 years, and they're slowly now starting to migrate some of the Waze data into the Google Maps for functionality. And so I would hardly say that they've stifled any innovation there either.
I think the bigger issue that I think she's maybe trying to tap into, but is missing the point on, is the data privacy side of this, right? And Facebook being the most egregious and allowing their platform to be used by potentially hostile political actors. Like, that's the bigger issue, and that's where I would like to see a candidate or somebody come out with some regulations around, do we do GPDR in the United States? Do we come with some other privacy legislation that makes sense? And in those cases where a company is violating privacy laws, maybe that does deserve a breakup in a monopolistic standpoint. But that law doesn't exist today, and I think that's the key message here too. Is that what she's proposing is against the law? Like, you can't do these things, but it doesn't mean there shouldn't be something. But I think she's going too far. All right, moving on to less political topics.
Phew, that was tense.
It was close. Our stance of not trying to talk about politics is sometimes it's dangerous. Azure Devops Server 2019 is now available. So initially, I thought this was just like an on-premise version of the Azure Devops services we've talked about in the past on the web, on the show. But this it is that, but it's also more. It is a new version of TFS. So they've renamed TFS, which is the Team Foundation server, to the Devops server. They've added all of those great features we talked about from Azure, the Azure boards, repos, pipelines, test plans, and artifacts. And they've also done a bunch of tight integration with GitHub Enterprise. And this can be leveraged on-premise or in Azure. And you can also leverage Azure PaaS services to handle the backend database. So overall, super nice upgrade to TFS for those of you in the Microsoft family of products. And if you are on TFS today, maybe take a look at moving to DevOps Server.
I've never used TFS, but very interested in taking a look at this because I think the Atlassian products kind of misses out a little bit on requirements management. And I know TFS and now DevOps Server has a module built in for requirements tracking, which I think were really useful in some of our industries.
That's very true. Yeah, the I definitely would be nice to be able to combine more and more of Jenkins and Jira and GitHub into a single tool. But TFS has been around a long time, and that's been their pitch. And while it's very popular in Microsoft shops, it hasn't really branched out. But it is Git compatible. It's supported Git for several versions now. It has quite a few capabilities in that space. Peter apparently doesn't use TFS either.
Never.
Yeah, the problem of having a podcast with people who are mostly on the Java side of the house is that you don't always have the Windows exposure. All right. Well, yeah, anyways, if you are using TFS and you're listening to the show, check out the new DevOps server. I think it's a great upgrade and something that you might get a lot of value out of. All right. This is the big story of the week. So Amazon announced what they're calling the open distro for ElasticSearch. They don't call it a fork, but by every definition of what I know a fork is, this is a fork. They see it as a value-added distribution for Elasticsearch brought to you by Amazon, Netflix, and Expedia. They will still be providing upstream code to core Elasticsearch and core Kibana, but it has several advantages, which includes the security plugin to support node-to-node encryption, supports up to 5 types of different auth, and role-based access controls and audit and logging. Event monitoring alerting features to allow notifications based on certain event thresholds. A new deep performance analytics API, so you can look at tools. You can use tools like PerfTop to look at your Elasticsearch data, and then of course SQL support to allow you to query your ES cluster with SQL statements. These 4 features are all paid for services from Elasticsearch directly. And so this has rifled the open source community a little bit in the last couple of days, and Twitter has exploded about this topic. In addition to this particular release by Jeff Barr, Adrian Cockcroft also published a blog on keeping open source open, which is directly related to this, and he makes several arguments about their stance on how they see open source and what their justifications are for going down this path with Elasticsearch.
I didn't like Jeff Barr's blog post very much. Adrian's blog was really interesting, and I think kind of sold it for me. And there've been some really fantastic discussions over the past couple of days about this, and I'm all for it. I really am. I think anyone who withholds basic functionality like encryption in transit and authentication for a service which is intended to run either on the internet, in a cloud, or any kind of network service that doesn't support those things, and I mean that really sucks. They should have pushed those things into the free version, and I mean they kind of had it coming. It's open source, and anyone has the right to take a copy of that as long as they adhere to the license and do what they like with it. That's all Amazon have done, yeah, I'm happy they did it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say, like, from looking at how certain open source kind of companies take these products and they make them enterprise ready, but then who's to say that the startup or the nonprofit or something like that, the small shop that wants to use some of these things, they need these features too. So it's not always fair when you look at, like, okay, well, Elastic's going to put all these great security features in their paid enterprise version, but then everybody else misses out. Like, who's to say that everyone should have access to that, or no one should have access to that? I mean, I think open source, keep with the definition of that for your whole product, and I think this is just going to benefit everyone.
Yeah, and to say that it's not a fork is kind of interesting. They don't. I believe AWS and Netflix, when they say that they don't intend this to be a fork and they'll continue to push code back to the origin. However, I don't think Elasticsearch are going to accept the pull requests for features which are in their paid suite. I mean, I can't believe that in the how many years it's been, that Elasticsearch has existed, nobody has suggested encryption in transit or authentication for the web gateway. Surely somebody's built that before and it's been declined.
Well, I don't necessarily know that they're going to provide this particular code back to them as open source, because this is all be code that's in XPack. But I think that they're saying is, if we're making improvements to Elasticsearch to make our stuff work better, we're still going to provide that backup stream to the project.
Everything in this list, the plugins for the encryption and everything else, all this is going to go back into the open source repo, and they will offer it up to Elasticsearch in a pull request, which clearly won't be accepted.
Yeah, why would they do that? Yeah, it's interesting because I have a very I buy a lot of software at my day job, and when I talk to these open source vendors and they're like, buy the enterprise product because that's how you get multi-region availability. It's such an anti-pattern, and while I wish Amazon had just worked with Elasticsearch directly to come up with a way to make XPack more available in the marketplace, I think Amazon has sort of the same opinion that I do, which is security should be a basic tenet of any software application. Encryption at rest should be a basic tenet. Things like the SQL support, maybe the Deep Analytics API, those are maybe things that I don't need in my Elasticsearch cluster, and so maybe those are things that I'd be willing to pay more for in the marketplace. But Amazon's definitely made a bold statement here and said, look, this is what we believe, that open source is open, and that we're going to put this out there, and if you want to use it, you can, and if you don't want to use it, that's fine too. And if you look at the tenets of open source, that's what the whole model is. That's why we allow forking. That's why we allow people to do pull requests, or if they're not happy with it, you do your own project and then you make that your own availability. I mean, MariaDB would not exist today if MySQL hadn't forked. And if your argument is, well, Maria forking screwed MySQL, that's a bad argument to make. So you kind of have to, in the open source world, you sort of have to accept that there's going to be people who potentially are threatening your model. But if you're providing good service, you're providing good quality at good value, I think you win out. But if you don't, then someone like Amazon or some other company, or even hell, Jonathan and you and I we all could write this ourselves too and make it public, so an open source, and no one would be mad at us. People are really mad because it's Amazon doing it, and they see it as Amazon being a bully. And I don't agree with that stance. But Elastico responded this morning actually as well, and it's a very lovely written thing. It basically comes down to, we're going to see how it goes, and we think our solution's better, and you're going to go with us anyways. And, they definitely poked Amazon a few times and said, they're pushing them in a direction they're not happy about. But at the end of the day, Elastic, this is open source. You do the thing. If you like it, take that. If not, come back to us. We have a better product. We love our product. We love our service, and we don't think Amazon's going to be a good shepherd.
Do you remember shareware from the 90s?
Oh,
maybe
yes.
2000s?
Along with my Amazon subscription, my AOL discs, and
exactly.
those CDs I got stuck to the back of gaming magazines with all that shareware on it. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, if Elasticsearch offered XPack, or let's not say XPack, if Elasticsearch offered these basic features which we think should be included in MVP for security for free, but said, hey, would you please donate if you use this in the corporate world, would people do it? Because really, that's all they're asking for.
Now, if you want XPack, you have to go get a salesperson from Elasticsearch. You have to you negotiate on the price, and they charge you a ridiculous amount of money, and that license is only a year license, and then you have to renew it. What you're saying is more of a donation model where, hey, I'm going to give you maybe a gift of $10,000 or $20,000 or a tip, and you're going to give me this code, and I'm going to contribute back to you. That's a little bit different.
Yeah, maybe.
For people who are afraid Amazon's not going to be a good shepherd with it, then when Amazon decides to not be a good shepherd, they could fork that.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because in one breath, everyone was saying how happy they were Amazon was doing Corretto because of the evil, bad Oracle company. And then, they do the same thing to Elasticsearch basically, and now they're the enemy. It's a little bit of, calling the kettle black.
We all like to root for the underdog.
Yeah, but Java 8 was at risk of being taken away completely, and support was going to disappear. And I understand why they would want to protect something like that, because there are so many customers that use that on their platform. I mean, Amazon's Elasticsearch offering is kind of crappy. It was stuck on an ancient version for such a long time, and they don't support XPack for whatever reason.
But they did in the last few versions of Elasticsearch, though. They're up to the latest version of Elasticsearch, or not the latest, but very close. They do now integrate, basically this authorization plugin that they have in the open source. They now have in the managed services, and some of these other items I would expect to see now appear in the Elasticsearch service as well in the future. Because this is the same thing as them releasing the container runtime that they built as open source, right? They build a container runtime, they put it out there. They said, we're going to maintain this for our own purposes anyways, because that's what's going to power our container platform. You can contribute to that or not, but the code's here. And then they're basically now saying, this is the code that's going to drive the Elasticsearch service on AWS. We're making that code available to anybody, and you can either contribute to it or not, but we're going to continue to maintain it because we need it for our service.
I think this was going to happen sooner or later in open source. People always wondered, how can this be a sustainable model? And now we've come to this this point in time where something's going to have to change for sure. And I hope it doesn't put a bunch of people out of business. I hope it doesn't stifle innovation, but I do hope it gives us better products to work with as customers.
Well, and I want better enterprise options, right? Like I'm happy to pay for these products. I just want you to make what I'm paying for valuable. And I just auth and DR and HA and all those things, like those are not the things I want to pay for. I want to pay for, your accelerators to make me integrating Elasticsearch better, right? Like they have a new product around site searching that's similar to a Google search appliance, right? That is not a thing that I would typically need. But if I have that use case, I'm happy to pay you for that use case because you're solving a problem that I need to solve in an enterprise, and I'm willing to pay you lots of money for that. I'm not willing to pay you for this basic components of open source, which technically is, Lucene. You guys did a ton of additional features to back, 11 years ago. But your product is built on open source tool. So I don't know. It's a weird thing. And I don't think Amazon's the bad guy here. I don't think Elasticsearch the victim completely here. I think it's a bit of both. Again, I would still like to see Amazon support things like buying XPack through Marketplace and being able to use that with their managed Elasticsearch cluster. And maybe they tried to do that and Elasticsearch didn't want to play ball. Maybe not. I don't know. But I definitely think, there is some things that they need to do around the Marketplace to make open source viable. But Amazon's also, very clearly, this is a complaint from customers. I'm pretty sure I'm one of the customers who complained about this exact issue, that I don't have ability to do auth in Elasticsearch from them on the managed services platform, and they heard my feedback, and this is their answer to that.
It really is two distinct things. There's the additional features which they're building, which compete with XPack, and then there's the issue of the open source code, but which is not actually open to use out, in the enterprise world. And so I understand why they've forked the repo and they've removed the pieces of code which don't belong there. They've removed the code for the proprietary features that you have to pay for. And that makes total sense to me. They should always have been kept in a separate repository.
Agreed. All right, moving on. The other bit of news that was a bit of a shocker yesterday morning was F5 has announced the acquisition of NGINX for $670 million. They are claiming this is a strategic acquisition. Together, F5 and NGINX will enable multi-cloud application services across all environments. They will keep NGINX as a standalone company. The CEO, Gus Robertsons, and founders Igor Sayozov and Maxim Konovalov, and I messed both those up, I'm sure, will continue to lead the company after the acquisition closes. F5 said the thriving open source community was one of the most attractive elements of this combination, and F5 recognized the trust that the user community has in NGINX.
I mean, when I hear thriving open source community, I hear people doing work for free on my product. And NGINX has suffered the same as Elasticsearch has, to be fair, with their enterprise offering, having some features which really should have belonged in the community version. And even now, NGINX kind of sucks with logging. It's really not a great product. But when compared with what F5 had to offer, sure, it's fantastic. The thing I don't understand about this, that some of the language they use in the press releases, it's kind of bizarre. Like, we bridge the divide between NetOps and DevOps. What does that even mean? Like, DevOps has nothing to do with the technology you choose to run your reverse proxies or web servers. I mean, I don't know.
Is that sort of admitting that, if you want to do infrastructure as code with Ninja templates on Python, that F5 doesn't really support that very well, but NGINX does, and so they're going to take that lessons learned how to do configuration in a file. Like, it was a weird statement in the press release.
Yeah, I guess it's old world versus new world. I mean, if you got to buy a $20,000 appliance and deploy it and configure it using some crummy old APIs, then sure. But
has anyone else tried to automate stuff with NGINX's API and F5's API?
NGINX is terrible. I really dislike the NGINX configuration files, and yes, we've got a cool tool lined up for the NGINX config builder, but it really sucks. And if you try and get JSON logs out from NGINX into like CloudWatch logs or even Elasticsearch, it's terrible. I mean, you have to really like kludge the whole thing together with literally like faking the JSON with the braces and the escaping the backslashes, and it's a nightmare. They've withheld some really crucial features from NGINX and made it a fantastic product. So I guess all in all, what NGINX has to offer and what F5 have to offer, they're a perfect team.
I tell you, I had a way easier time with NGINX than I did with F5 when automating some stuff around trying to get doing session draining and auto scaling.
I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because one of the complaints I have about the F5 appliances that you can buy in Amazon Marketplace or Azure Marketplace is the throughput is garbage. Like they just don't scale. They're not horizontally scalable. They just don't work. And so if F5 were able to take the NGINX technology and make a more scalable cloud solution that supports iRules and some of the F5 nomenclatures that are there, maybe that's interesting. And I am sort of intrigued to see if something happens like that around this space because, F5's power is its ASIC. And the more we move towards cloud, the less of an ASIC driven world we're in, except for now you can do the virtual ASICs, but it's still, you don't get that speed of offboarding TLS encryption and offboarding all this other stuff to specialized ASIC processors. So the need to be able to do this in software becomes much more important. And it's very clear, because the F5 virtual appliance F5 has been available for years now, that they're struggling to scale that unit to anything that is what a customer wants or needs in the cloud. So it is sort of interesting from that perspective, but we'll see.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, they're up until now, I think their cloud strategy has been people who want to migrate to the cloud and are dependent on our features and invested in our technology. The easiest path for them is to spin up a virtual appliance in the cloud, even though they're sacrificing, ease of redundancy, reliability, speed, etc. There's no other choice, and I think that people are starting to look at that as a transformation item, even a day zero item. We're not going to depend on F5 if we're going to the cloud. Let's get off of it and move to an open source technology there, even if that means moving some of that logic into our application if we don't have it in the open source technology. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's smart. I think it's a smart move for them to get just jump in with both feet, grab one of the technologies and figure it out later.
There's been a lot of F5 stuff written in TCL, Tickle, and I don't believe NGINX has a Tickle plugin, but it has a Lua plugin. We could fairly easily move all those little scripts that people have written over the years to NGINX. I guess, I mean, even if you deploy an F5 appliance in the cloud, you're still limited by, I mean, you're still, unless you're spending $40 an hour on a massive instance, you're still not going to get the performance of a dedicated piece of hardware. And then it's expensive. The license fee is expensive, and to scale it horizontally would be just totally prohibitive in cost. I mean, maybe NGINX is really their path forward. I think this acquisition is an admission that their business was stunted and they needed to look for growth.
Yeah, I was going to mention, like, I've been in a couple enterprises in the past where you do have the traditional old guard that, you're moving to AWS, but, we need the F5 appliance in the cloud, and then you try and manage it in a similar way to how you're deploying everything else, and it doesn't work. So if nothing else, this new partnership that hopefully will come out of this is going to be benefits for performance, for integration, things like that between NGINX, F5, and then all the downstream services. So if nothing else, at least make it, let's hope this makes it easier to interact with things like F5 in enterprises where maybe you don't have a choice, or it's hard to kind of move without taking a step to F5 before you move to something else.
In other news, Amazon releases Open Distro for NGINX with all of the enterprise
features.
Of
course, exactly. It's coming one of these days.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I was like, okay, is this going to be the Amazon's play for every every company that's basically trying to do this licensing garbage to them? Like, okay, well, if you're going to do that, we're just going to turn around and release this as open source.
I believe
that would be interesting.
NGINX partnered with Amazon a few years ago to build something, and I heard rumors that the ALB was based on NGINX code.
Oh, cool.
Well, I mean, I always assumed it was either NGINX or HA proxy, but maybe they built something custom now. But I always kind of assumed it was something based on open source at some point.
Yeah. Speaking of AWS, when I think of cloud, I think of Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn has been around since 2008. They've been on the forefront of cloud enablement and have delivered powerful transformations for hundreds of clients, from startups to Fortune 500, including highly regulated industries. They were early visionaries and practitioners of using code to automate infrastructure and operations to drive up cloud efficiencies while driving down costs. Terraform, Ansible, Jenkins, AWS, Azure, and GCP. Go to fogops.io/thecloudpod to learn more about their FogOps services and sign up for a free, well-architected framework review.
Let's turn it over to you, Peter, for the lightning round.
All right. So for a quick rehash for Matt, we're going to go through a bunch of items that aren't special enough for us to talk about for a long time. But feel free on each one to give us a little one-liner on what you think of it, and the best one-liner will get the victory. So you are playing on behalf of the guest spot. Current ranking. Justin's got 3 wins. Jonathan's got 2. And our guest has 2. I have 1, which is, I don't even know if I earned that one. But okay.
If I look back on the tape, I do question that one still, but it's okay.
Come on. I'm almost just going to pull that off the list. You can't be the judge. You can't be the judge and a competitor.
I thought he was going to give it to himself last week.
I thought he was giving it to himself last week, too. I think we distracted him.
What did I say?
I don't remember what you said, but I think it distracted you with something else, and then you couldn't remember what funny thing you said earlier. And especially when I listened back to it, I was like, I think Peter won this one, but hey, it's already been declared for me.
Can I give myself this one ahead of time for that NGINX comment? I thought that was
good. That was good.
That was pretty good.
That was good.
All right, here we go. Lightning round. AWS Performance Insights is now GA for SQL Server.
They've gone the Oracle pricing model on this. It's priced per vCPU.
Well, I mean, I can already tell you the insights you need on SQL Server. It's too slow, and move to Aurora.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I don't know who really the audience for this is. It's so expensive to run SQL Server and RDS. It almost is a joke when you bring it up to people.
I know people.
I can say that I am one of those people.
Okay, AWS SSM on-premise now handles large hybrid environments, previously limited to less than 1,000 instances.
Thanks, Amazon, for reminding me of the dumb limitation you had 6 months ago when you announced this.
I love the pricing model. I can't imagine if you're paying for anything above 1,000 instances, it's really more of an intelligence test than a pricing test. This is easy to game. This is pretty easy to game if you read the details.
Yep.
All right. AWS Corretto 11 is now available as a release candidate.
So they said April. Like, didn't we remember when they announced AWS Corretto 8? They said, Corretto 11 coming in preview in April, and then they announced it early, and now they have a release candidate. Like, we need to talk to them about what they mean by April.
I wish the features I cared about would be early.
Wait, what features do you care about in Corretto 11?
Oh no, it's services I care about. I wish services I cared about would be this early.
Oh yeah, like
I agree. Everything else takes forever.
Yeah, you talk to a product manager, and they're like, "Yeah, we're working on that." And I'm like, "Oh, great. When will you have it?" "Oh, sometime in the next 12 to never."
Q4. Which year?
AWS Step Function adds tag-based permissions.
I hate this. I hate them for this. For years, I've been preaching not to use tags for security. And now they are telling people to use tags for security.
I remember that was an anti-pattern for a long time, especially when they were limited to like 10 tags for EC2. But I thought that was part of when they increased the tag limit. They're saying, we're seeing people use tagging for all these things, and especially tagging in IAM in particular could be useful for permission setting.
Informational is fine. The thing is, a tag is its own object. It's not like an EC2 tag or a step function tag or something else. A tag is a tag. It's an actual thing. And if you've got permission to create a tag or delete a tag, you've got permission to create or delete any tag on anything. So, I mean, I guess in the world where we automate everything and Terraform or CloudFormation does the deployments for us and nobody has access to go and tweak things manually, this is fine. It's a cheap way of doing some kind of resource grouping. But people don't live in that world. At least most people don't live in that world. And as soon as you give people access to modify tags, I mean, like changing the name of something is changing the tag. So you give people to change the name of something, like an EC2 instance, you're giving people the permission to change the permissions on these step functions.
Yeah.
The permission to change the permissions.
Right.
I
It's
love
dangerous. And I'm like, why, I mean, we do use this, but why choose step functions as the next one? I can think of like 10 other things that are way more ingrained in the AWS ecosystem.
Right. Auto scaling groups would be a good example.
Right, exactly.
Curses.
Well, and I look forward to your future rants about future tag-based permission models. That maybe they chose steps. Like, hey, what service doesn't get used that often? Oh, step functions. Let's try it there first.
Right.
But what a weird thing though, like step functions. So if you have two different parts of your organization that use step functions to trigger things, then we think tags are a great idea for this. Like, no. I mean, how many step functions do people have that they can't fit these things into normal IAM policies?
I don't know. I mean, I only know one person in the world who uses step functions, and I'm sure he loves this.
I mean, at least add it to Lambda first, right? Before the step function. I mean, come on.
All right. There is a new AWS Direct Connect console.
That way you can see how much money you're paying to talk to your outpost on-prem.
I actually used this in the past week, the day they launched it, and it was so confusing. And I felt like it's basically the same thing, except they took away the ability for me to download an LOA right away. And now I have to wait.
They also released an SNS console that I couldn't be bothered to put into the lightning round notes, which I looked at and had the exact same thought. So I'm glad the Direct Connect is also following the same line as the new SNS console.
Well, some people converge on a really nice looking UI for everything that they have to offer. Amazon is going completely the opposite direction, and they have 4 or 5 different styles of competing UI, and all of them are just a nightmare to use.
I'm envisioning the console in the Matrix right now. Watching BGP rain down on my screen from top
That
to
was a
bottom.
sushi recipe or something.
Awesome. All right, Starbucks launches its latest drink, the Cloud Macchiato.
And it's delicious.
I can't wait to try it, but I can't find the API documentation.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no Terraform support yet either.
And we know CloudFormation is at least a year away.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk in there. I'm going to ask for the free tier.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
Oh no, that was a big laugh. Oh no. I thought I was going to win.
You could have muted yourself before you laughed, and then we wouldn't have known.
I know. Then I didn't give it away. But I thought that was funny. Free tier is so much better than APIs. Okay. AWS code commit now supports VPC endpoints.
Good. Now for the other 160 services.
Yeah, I can't wait till the day that we can stop talking about these in lightning rounds.
Announcing these. Yeah, exactly.
Great. You finally did a thing you should have already done. Great. Bravo.
AWS Amplify console adds support for instance CDN cache invalidation and Delta deployments.
Well, I guess it's better than updating it in CloudFront for 45 minutes.
You're reading typos verbatim from our notes. What's that movie with the guy who they trolled him by putting stuff like question marks and things and his
Oh, yeah.
So, the thing about this is that if he did his job, he would actually put these headlines in, but he never does it, and I just assume he's not going to. And so I do them, and I'm literally blowing through these notes in like an hour. And yeah, there's typos everywhere. I fix them as we're going through, but yeah, so that's pretty awesome.
Instant CDN cache invalidation. Oh, now I know he's going to read these things word for word. I'm going to start putting
Oh
some
yes, we're totally trolling Peter. Trolling Peter now. This will teach him not to do the homework.
Right. Instant CDN cache invalidation. That makes so much more sense.
Makes so much more sense.
Trust Amazon to innovate, like not uploading files that don't need to be uploaded when you do a deployment. I mean, that's visionary.
I'm still reeling from my mistake. Okay, AWS ECS introduces enhanced container dependency management.
Finally.
This is how you identify you have dependencies on Kubernetes and moving to Kubernetes as fast as possible.
Right.
Just what I wanted. Tightly coupled containers. This is so great. AWS announces the Amazon Linux 2 pre-upgrade assistant.
This is like an onion piece. It's like, get used to the bugs before they're real.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who would think about using this. They need to have an Amazon Linux to CentOS or something like that.
Amazon Linux and Amazon Linux 2 this different? I mean, I know there's systemd versus the other one that I never remember the name of. But like, do I really need this assistant? Like, if you're breaking this much backwards compatibility, I'm not sure I want to use Amazon Linux ever.
Oh no, they're totally different. They're totally different. Loads of things will
Completely
break, but to be fair, systemd has been around for a very long time, and if you're only just starting to use systemd, then
Yeah.
you've missed the
There's
boat.
bigger problems. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know seriously, is there a Amazon Linux 2 upgrade assistant? And we use this before we
No.
can use that?
No,
The
no,
pre-upgrade
That's a
assistant.
great question.
That's good.
Like pre-gaming?
Yeah.
Like
That's a great
pre-game,
question.
and then I go to a bar and get more. Kind of like that?
there is no upgrade.
Wow.
There's no upgrade path between them, so it's kind of it's kind of funny that they've got the pre-upgrade assistant.
Yeah, the pre-upgrade.
There is no upgrade.
License Manager now supports new CPU-based licensing and software licensing vendors.
This feature built entirely for Oracle.
Yes, 100%.
It'll be ironic if the tool increases Oracle's revenue.
I just don't think there are enough press releases for License Manager. It's the first I've heard of it.
Speaking of news releases
What?
for License Manager now also supports on-premise servers and tracking.
Again, couldn't have done this on the same day. Now, in the defense of this one, unlike last week's, one of these was released on February 28th, and one was released on the 1st of, or it's sometime in March, I think. if I follow the nomenclature of this URL linking properly,
Yeah.
Or at least it was supposed to have been released in February, because technically we're only on the last 7 days of news. So something definitely happened on this particular license. Now put them together.
I like they split it over 2 days though, because normally when Amazon posts their blogs, they post about 50 in one go, and they all scroll past in the chat room where we have the RSS feed, and I think, yep, I'm not going to click on those.
Yeah, that normally happens right after I lock the show topics for the week. That's typically when I get like 7 of them, and then I have to look at them and say, yeah, none of these are worthy, and it basically Game of Thrones them, like, you're not worthy, you are. Like,
I did notice as you look at these, they were both posted on March 8th, 2019, inside of the post. So they're doing it same day releases. As many, it's a volume game.
well, that's how you keep your name in the news, I guess. Is
Right,
You just dump
right.
as many press releases as you can. I mean,
Exactly.
not all. I mean, a lot of these are coming from the What's New RSS feed, which is not, it's not like the Jeff Barr treatment, but they are definitely things they're announcing, and they do it in large volumes.
Last one of the round, Azure real-time serverless applications now support Signal R service bindings.
Wow, so Azure have just invented WebSockets.
I just think about the acronyms: real-time serverless, RTS, plus Signal R, so SR. Like, it just.
One area where the hyperscalers do compete is on how much their names suck.
Oh, I'm starting to think Azure is taking the crown on that one. I used to think, Corey Quinn, he's always giving Amazon such a bad time on that I thought that no one could be worse. And then we started this podcast, and now I'm exposed to both Google's naming and Azure's naming, and Azure's is by far the worst. Like, the whole concept of blob storage
Premium.
as a naming is awful.
Premium blob storage.
Oh, premium. But there's also remember the data box blob disk thing? Like, what is that?
I think they have a dice with different words on. They just roll the dice a few times.
And starting the 802.11c standard, we're going to do cloud service naming standard.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice.
All right, speaking of names, that's the end of our lightning round. I guess I didn't
realize how many we had, but it seemed like it went on forever.
Yeah.
Or it just got awkward in the middle there because of that instance versus instant mistake.
That's right. I can cut out all the ones where I didn't have a good comment.
I do enjoy your editing of this, because like sometimes I'm like, I'm pretty sure someone said a comment there that was not appropriate, and like you edited it out, or nope, you didn't.
Yeah. I save all those. I save all those for
blackmail later. All right, Peter, who won the lightning round today?
I really wanted to win, but I laughed too hard at free tier for the
that
cloud.
was good.
That was good. Yeah, I fully concede to Jonathan this time around.
Excellent.
You got it, Jonathan.
For you, the listeners of the CloudPod podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook downloaded with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/thecloudpod. Again, that's audibletrial.com/thecloudpod for your free audiobook. All right, well, let's move on to cool tools with Jonathan.
Well, this week we have Matt to talk about Cloud Ping.
Cool. So this is a tool I first created, I think it was back in 2016 was when it initially launched. The goal or the motive behind this was I was doing a lot of projects at the time when I was doing consulting, and people would always ask you questions about like picking two instances or two regions in the world that AWS had data centers in, what's the latency like between these? And you would always spin up a couple instances, maybe do a VPC peer after they made that available, look at that, get a general idea, but there was no data collection around this or visualization or anything like that. So I just kind of was like, hey, Lambda's cool, serverless is cool, let's figure out a way to put all this stuff together. So I kind of used it as like a learning opportunity, but also trying to solve a problem. And so what I came up with was this Cloud Ping tool, which essentially it's just a bunch of Lambda functions, one deployed in each region. It reaches out to a public endpoint in all the other regions, and it just stores the latency information in DynamoDB. And that's really as far as it goes. I'm working on some improvements. I get a lot of requests for kind of graphing and visualization and historical data. So trying to work on some of that stuff now as I'm trying to figure out JavaScript, which I'm not a big fan of, but taking some of that further and kind of getting more information out there. But really, its foundational purpose was to be super simple and just provide like some data on latency between AWS regions.
It's really cool. When we started talking about this last week before the show, I kind of wondered what was the motivation with 100 milliseconds versus, for the green and 100 to 180 for the yellow. Was there a particular service or database which you had in mind which doesn't perform well more than 100, or who were the people trying to do things between region that you're trying to dissuade?
So that's a funny question actually, because picking the different colors and the ranges that I used was extremely arbitrary. There was no kind of rhyme or reason to that, and I tried to do some research on like what are standard latencies that are acceptable in these types of situations, and there wasn't really any specific kind of source for that. But as I started looking at the data, this was kind of, there was a breaking point almost between like different continents around 100. And then obviously when you start moving to the next continent over, it looked like it was in between like 100 and 200, maybe a little bit more. And then as you were going between like Australia and the US or, Asia Pacific and some of the like Brazil, that's huge. And so that's kind of where they came from, but it was really an arbitrary decision. I wish I could say that this was super scientific in how I thought of this, but it totally was not.
It makes sense to me. There's two games that I played in my past that were latency sensitive. One was online racing, and then the other was first-person shooters. And anything over 200 milliseconds is death, is unplayable.
Right.
Or you're going to lose every time. And anything under 100 milliseconds was usually pretty golden.
Maybe you could, like, I know you don't want feature requests from me, but
no, fine, please.
maybe you could have like either that be a box that I could fill in based on my app, or maybe you have like some pre-selected, like this is for database replication, or this is for gaming, like Peter's example. Maybe you had some like t-shirt sizing kind of based around that. That way you can kind of tie a little bit more to the use case, because like a database that's synchronous versus a database that's asynchronous, I have a different concern about latency than I do otherwise. And if you have those considerations in mind, that would be interesting. So you mentioned the visualization, and that was actually one of the comments that I had. I said it'd be kind of cool to see this over time and historically, and so it's cool that you're working on that. You mentioned this is in Lambda. So what does the architecture kind of look like for this in the backend? Is it just basically a single Lambda that fires up in the region, or do you use VPC peering? Like, what does that look like in the backend?
So the current version is super simple. For its current architecture, it's literally one Lambda function in each region. I have a DynamoDB table in Ohio that contains all the different regions that I want to go through and scan. there's a couple adjustments to make when AWS releases a new region. So I don't like to scan everything based on the describe regions API. So basically, Lambda function every 6 hours in every region goes through, pulls the region list from DynamoDB, grabs a ping time to the DynamoDB endpoint, the public endpoint, in all the other regions, and then stores that back in a DynamoDB database in Ohio. At the very beginning of this, there were a bunch of regions that still didn't even have Lambda, so there were this kind of started out as a hybrid between starting up an EC2 instance on a schedule in those other regions with a Lambda function in Ohio, so kind of trigger those to start, and then doing the exact same Python script in the background and then shutting them down. And then as Lambda came to all the other regions, I put that basically across the board. My next version, in addition to visualization, is I want to start looking at VPC peering. So getting a peer set up between all the different regions, maybe even looking at what's the difference between VPC peering and transit gateway. So you can kind of look at latencies through these different services. So it's not only public endpoints, but also going through the AWS network a little bit more and kind of getting some numbers with those. So trying to balance too complex with being able to show all this data, but also giving what people are asking for, because I get a lot of different requests for, VPC peering, transit gateway, visualization, different services besides DynamoDB, stuff like that. So that's kind of where we are right now.
And how much does it cost to run?
I think it's about $15 a month total, and that was I haven't looked in a while. There was a point where I did have a couple EC2 instances that were still running in the background, and that was part of that. So once I've switched over to all Lambda, I honestly haven't looked at that in probably a year, but I imagine it's significantly less than that.
That's awesome, man. If I tried to do this in the 90s with data centers, we would have had to get this company funded.
Yeah.
Yeah. DynamoDB is the back end of this. You were mentioning JavaScript for the visualization layer, but maybe you could just use QuickSight for that and then just plug in QuickSight into your app as an embedded.
That's a great idea.
I think a globe would be really cool. You can use the Google Maps API to render a globe on the screen.
That's exactly what I'm thinking of. Those travel maps where you have the lines across and you can kind of see. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you could even make it like a heat map where you scroll the world around to where you are, and then you can see kind of rings of color out to the data centers.
Yeah, no, I like that.
You're not going to use Flot?
No, I've gone through about 10 of those, and I hate JavaScript. I'm just going to say that. It's just I can't stand it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate this. This is really awesome, and I can definitely, I can see some conversations we have with architects or people concerned about latency and being like, hey, just look at this website, you can get a good idea. So I look forward to your guys' enhancements. Let us know when you do the enhancements, and we'll have you back on to tell us all about your next release, or we'll at least plug it again in the podcast. So yeah, awesome.
Cool.
I get started, and I'm going to use it for my customers too.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this week. How do people follow you on the interwebs if they want to, reach out, give you an idea for this tool of yours, or just say hi or thank you? How would they reach out to you, and where can they find your content?
Sure. So Twitter is MDA590. That's generally the handle I have across the interwebs, and then the proud new owner of ma.dev as well. So you can look me up there, and that's my website.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Well, thank you again, and have a great night, you guys.
Cool. Thanks for having me. See you
Good
guys.
night.
Good night.